Alright guys, on today's episode, just a quick run through on what we've done, which is put the shift control in for the gearbox so it manually shifts 1, 2, 3 and 4. We did a service on the car so it's ready for the dyno. So after this episode we'll be on the dyno and making some numbers. Just pulling out the Series 1 fascia. We're lucky enough that the standard radio was not in there. It made it a lot easier, and we had noticed that none of the screws were in, so we've gone and got some screws for when we put it back in. But what we're going to do is use the cigarette lighter from it for the power source. For our shift kit manual box that Joel Taylor has supplied for us, and he sent the wiring diagram over, so we've ran those 4 wires through the body of the car down to the gearbox, which we'll wire in when we get underneath. And these 2 for the power source, we're going to go to the cigarette lighter because that's an already fusible link. And because I hate wiring, we've got these connectors, wire taps. So one of them will go over the ground on the cigarette lighter to the ground on this. We'll put them in, fold it over, and all you do is use your pliers and clamp it down, and that'll give you the connection between them, and that'll power up our box nice and easily, and we don't have to run a fuse or nothing because it's already a fusible link. Once that's done, we'll get under the car and I'll show you how to wire in the rest of the shift kit box.
So you've got 2 screws down the bottom there behind the ashtray, and then 2 inside behind the radio, one there and one on the other side, and the rest will just clip back in. Yep.
So just cutting the gearbox plug off, which we'll use for the shift kit. And the injector plug as well, we'll cut off down there as well, which will wire in as well. Up very well. Get this wrap off. Okay, and from looking at this plug, you see the 2 blank ones at the bottom. That's how we look at it. You should have a row of 4. You move those 4 out of the way, and then above that should be another row of 4, and then you're left with the top 2, which is a green and black and an orange. Those ones there, so they will get wired in, so it'll be green to green and orange to blue, and your 2 browns, doesn't matter what way they go, they get wired just into that plug. Either way works. So we'll wire all that in And that's the shift kit install done. Boost gauge. Servicing the LSD diff today. We're just going to change the oil. We bought the Series 1 AU because we knew they came out factory with the LSD. So we've serviced the gearbox and that oil was black. So we're guessing the diff oil's never been done. So we're going to do that. We went and picked up Pro Gear Oil, Premium Mineral 140, which will be fine for everyday LSD use in the IRS diff. And also in the live axle you can use the same one. We'll put that in. Okay, so a little hint and tip that I always do is always make sure your refill bolt can come off, because the last thing you want to do is drop all your oil and then not have the right side spanner or rounded or have trouble getting your refill bolt up. So that's probably a 29mm spanner or a 30. And I use a 30 on it just to crack it. And that's where we will refill the diff oil. Like I said, I like to always just crack them just to know that I'm not going to be able to refill it. And then the drain one is a 15mm, the very bottom bolt. Alright, so just refilling the diff now. It takes 2 litres just to refill it. Draining out the 98 so we can put in the E85. So all we've done is taken the return from the surge tank and just let that into the jerry can with the car running. And it'll fill up our jerry cans with all the 98 till the car dies. And then once the car dies, we'll fill it with E85. And we'll add a couple of fuel filters just to clean the tank. And we'll flush it out. And then we'll be on to the dyno. So now we've added the E85 into the fuel tank. What I do is I add a Z200 fuel filter, which is easily and cheaply found at Super Cheap, onto the feed line that feeds into the surge tank. I find just that little bit extra filtration of the fuel, because E85 in the tank is going to bring all the dirt and grime up, so I'll change that every tank for the first 3 or 4 tanks. And then once I'm happy with the fuel, I'll leave it in there for a couple of months or so. Every service I might just change it because they're cheap enough. So now we're still going to run the E85 and we're still going to siphon it back out into the jerry can. We'll do that 2 or 3 times with the same fuel just to make sure it is getting that clean. And then we'll put the E85 in and it should be as clean as we can get it without dropping the tank. I've done this in 5-6 cars now and I've never dropped or put a new tank in. This is the way I clean the tanks, and they're all running on E85 and I've never had a fuel problem, so I'm confident with this method and it's the easiest, cheapest way. Barra's in the AU. We've now got it running. We've put E85 in it and we've ran it up to temps. So now that we're happy, we're going to service it. So we'll change the gearbox oil, diff oil, fuel filter, spark plugs, brake fluid, coolant we've already topped up, engine oil we already put new engine oil before we started it. So we'll get into doing a quick service of it, everything. We're going to run a BKR 7E NGK plug for the E85. They're a colder plug, and Empire Mechanical Racing, that's what they recommend. That's what we use in my 9-second car, so it won't be a problem. They come gapped at 1.1, so we're going to gap that down to 0.7 or 0.28. I don't know if you can see. Yeah, so we'll gap it down. There is a proper tool you can use, but I just use the rock. We'll just use the body of the car. Tap it until your feeler gauge is pretty much nice and tight in there like that. And now we'll whack them in and start the car in the next coming weeks. Also coming up on the channel, we're going to have a lot of other racing things in the Silver AU. We've got Power Cruise coming up, we've got Jamboree coming up. We're going to film us at those events and get some footage of them up. We've also got a video coming up on the 9-second AU, how that was built, just what it's running, turbo, gearbox. A couple of videos of that at Roll Racing already. And then we've also got the red one booked in for Roll Racing. So it's booked in for the dyno and we're confident. So we've already gone ahead and booked it in for the next Roll Racing event in Sydney. So we'll bring you guys along for the footage of us starting to enjoy the car. We've now built it, it's finished, it's time to enjoy it. Stay tuned.